Senior U.S. defense officials faced intense scrutiny from lawmakers as they unveiled updated cost figures for the United States' ongoing military campaign involving Iran at a congressional hearing in Washington. The session brought into sharp focus not only ballooning expenditures, but also questions about military readiness, munitions, inventories, and how the Pentagon is preparing to sustain its forces in an increasingly volatile region. At the heart of the discussion was the latest estimate of how much the conflict has cost the U.S. government to date. Defense officials revealed that the tally has climbed to nearly $29 billion, a substantial increase from earlier figures. This update emerged during testimony before a House Appropriations Committee.
Distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's historic $1.5 trillion fiscal year 2027 budget for the Department of War. The President's budget request reflects the urgency of the moment, as was mentioned by many, addressing both the deferment of long-standing problems as well as positioning our forces for the current and future fight.
As chairman, my duty is to ensure our civilian leadership has a comprehensive range of options, military options, alongside the associated risks to make the nation's hardest and most complex decisions. I owe the President, the Secretary, and the Congress the truth at every turn, and my blueprint for this approach has always been General George C. Marshall.
Mr. Hurst, on April 29th, as you indicated to the ranking member, you said that the Iran war had cost $25 billion in total. You reaffirmed that today. Do you have any other updated costs or projections since that testimony that you've given? Outside reporting estimates have indicated that the war costs could be $1 billion a day. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I think
where lawmakers press defense leaders for transparency about financial trends and long-term implications. Those figures reflect a combination of operational expenses, repair and replacement of equipment, and other costs associated with the deploying forces and sustaining them in theater. The updated estimate, roughly $4 billion more than what had been publicly disclosed just weeks earlier, signaled to members of Congress that expenses are mounting as the conflict continues without a clearly defined end date. During the hearing, Representative Pete Aguilar of California asked Pentagon Comptroller Jules Hurst III whether there were new projections since his previous testimony. Aguilar noted that earlier figures placed the cost at about $25 billion and referenced outside estimates suggesting the war could be costing $1 billion a day. Hurst acknowledged the shift in figures, explaining that the Pentagon's teams continually review and update cost estimates. At the time of testimony in front of the House, it was $25 billion, but the Joint Staff Team and the Comptroller team are constantly looking at that estimate. And so now we think it's closer to $29 billion.
General Caine, the depleted munitions have been a subject of some of the discussions that you've even heard here today. With respect to stockpiles that we have around the world, key regions like the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East. Can you give us an update? What are you hearing from the combatant commands about their munitions status around the world?
Well, sir, we have sufficient munitions for what we're tasked to do right now. That's what I hear from the COCOMs. What I will say is I will always want more, so I appreciate the effort of this committee and the Congress. We're always going to want more munitions.
Secretary Hegseth, what are you doing to support the involved services to recap their losses?
We're submitting a $1.5 trillion budget that'll remake the department and ensure that every warfighter in the future has exactly what they need, and we're never in a fair fight. And I take issue with the characterization that munitions are depleted in a public forum. That's not true. And ultimately, we have all the munitions needed to execute what we need to execute, and we're going to ensure that we supercharge that going into the future.
I think you've heard differences from both sides of the aisle.
That's because of updated repair and replacement of equipment costs, and also just general operational costs to keep people in theater, he said. Lawmakers repeatedly pressed for more detailed accounting, challenging officials to provide a clearer picture of how dollars are being spent and what they are buying. The growing cost of the conflict has become a focal point for legislators who are already grappling with broader fiscal concerns and competing budget priorities. Aguilar asked Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth when formal accounting would be made available to the committee and to Congress more broadly. In response, Hegseth pledged that the Pentagon would share information when it was relevant and required, while noting that they had already updated the committee on the latest figures that morning. We'll share what we can. I think we've updated on that number this morning, but when it's relevant and required, we will share it, he said. That response underscored a tension that has been building between Congress and the Pentagon over transparent science oversight. Many lawmakers have expressed frustration with what they see as piecemeal disclosures, urging more comprehensive updates on financial matters and strategic planning. Beyond the bottom line, the hearing also wrestled with questions about how the war is affecting military readiness. Members of Congress expressed concern that prolonged engagements could strain U.S. military stockpiles and undermine the military's ability to respond to other global contingencies. Representative Aguilar shifted the focus to munitions inventories, asking the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, for an assessment of stockpile levels around the world. Caine, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, responded that current munitions holdings are adequate for ongoing missions, but he acknowledged a constant desire for higher levels. Well, sir, we have sufficient munitions for what we're tasked to do right now. That's what I hear from the CEOCOMs. What I will say is I will always want more. So I appreciate the effort of this committee and the Congress. We're always going to want more munitions, Caine said. Caine's comments highlighted the balance military leaders must strike between preparing for current operations and planning for potential future challenges. The notion of sufficient munitions suggests that while stocks are not critically low at present, there could be limits if the conflict escalates or if resources are needed elsewhere. The dialogue then returned to Secretary Hegseth, with Aguilar asking what actions are being taken to help the military services replenish equipment and address losses incurred in the conflict. Hegseth pointed to the administration's overarching budget proposal, which he described as transformative and designed to equip future warfighters more effectively. We're submitting a $1.5 trillion budget that will remake the department and ensure that every warfighter in the future has exactly what they need, and we're ever in a fair fight. I take issue with the characterization that munitions are depleted in a public forum. That's not true. And ultimately, we have all the munitions needed to execute what we need to execute, and we're going to ensure that we supercharge that going into the future, Hegseth said. His remarks were met with mixed reactions from lawmakers. Some appreciated the assertion that replenishment and modernization are priorities, while others questioned whether the Pentagon's budgeting process adequately reflects the urgent needs of troops currently deployed. Several points. Representatives from both sides of the aisle acknowledged differences in views about munitions and readiness. Several lawmakers underscored the importance of clear, comprehensive reporting, emphasizing that fiscal transparency was vital not only for accountability, but also for public trust. The hearing also touched on broader strategic objectives underlying the United States engagement in the region. Hegseth emphasized that preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon remains a central goal of U.S. policy and outlined the multiple pathways through which that objective could be pursued. The theory of the entire case is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And if that has to be done kinetically and militarily, the Department of War is locked and loaded and ready to do that, Hegseth said. He continued by outlining alternative avenues for achieving the objective, including diplomatic measures and broader government efforts. If it happens through Project Freedom, where you move commerce through, if it happens through a negotiated deal, The president was very clear even yesterday. This is actually quite simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon one way or another, and we're here to support as one tool of the whole of government to make that happen, he added. Those remarks align with repeated statements from administration officials that dismantling Iran's nuclear embassy is a non-negotiable element of U.S. strategy. Notably, the name of the project, Hegseth, referenced as an ongoing effort to ensure freedom of navigation and the security of commercial shipping in key waterways, which has been a flashpoint in tensions with Iran. While testimony focused heavily on numbers and readiness, lawmakers also sought to frame the conflict within broader geopolitical trends. Discussions acknowledged that the situation in the Middle East remains fluid, with periodic escalations threatening regional stability. At the same time, there were frequent references to the need for a sustainable and coherent strategy that balances military operations with diplomatic engagement and long-term security interests. For members of Congress, fiscal transparency is not an abstract concern. With federal budget negotiations underway in Washington, defenders of robust oversight argue that lawmakers must understand the true cost of military engagements as they weigh billions of dollars in defense spending against pressing domestic needs. More than once, representatives stressed that public confidence and democratic accountability hinge on the government's ability to explain how taxpayer resources are being allocated and whether those expenditures align with clearly articulated national objectives. Outside the hearing room, reporting from multiple news organizations has similarly highlighted concerns about the campaign's financial toll and the Pentagon's budgeting practices. Analysts have noted that the path from field operations to publicly released accounting is often opaque, leading to gaps in understanding and fueling calls for reform in how military costs are tracked and disclosed. The broader political backdrop includes ongoing debate over the direction of U.S. foreign policy and defense priorities. Many lawmakers have expressed frustration with what they perceive as insufficient strategic clarity from the administration, while others emphasize the imperative of countering threats before they materialize. At the same time, voices from both parties have underscored that the United States must maintain credible deterrence and protect its interests around the world. This includes not only confronting nuclear proliferation challenges, but also ensuring that military forces are equipped and ready for a wide range of contingencies. As budget negotiations intensify on Capitol Hill, lawmakers will continue to grapple with how best to allocate resources amid competing priorities. Defense spending and the costs of ongoing operations will remain central to that debate. The hearing underscored the growing demand within Congress for comprehensive information about the financial and strategic implications of the Iran campaign. With updated figures drawing fresh attention to the war's cost, lawmakers are pledging renewed focus on oversight and accountability. At the same time, defense leaders are urging a balanced perspective, highlighting readiness, ongoing modernization efforts, and the strategic imperative of countering nuclear threats. Whether those contrasting priorities will converge in upcoming budget decisions remains an open question. But what emerged unmistakably from the hearing was a recognition that fiscal scrutiny and strategic clarity are now inextricably linked to the nation's military posture.